Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 133 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Okay, keep making progress. It's not as fast as I'd like. It's life, man. So appreciate y'all hanging around. And like I said, once these videos are posted, you got to keep perspective on what the big picture is. Once these are posted and they're one next to the other, it doesn't matter, this time, actual temporal time now that we're working in. So I just got to keep plugging. I've been working on the clay some to make sure that model's really, dimensionally correct. And I've shot all the way up to this point here that'll be essentially on her nipple. We got one here and one here. They're exactly 8 inches apart. The head's 8 inches on the clay. And I've got her head tipped forward and turned just a little bit. And so with the overall height of everything, the way I've got it, it's about 19.5 inches tall, the clay. And that's exactly the distance from these points to the top of the stone. Which is, you try, that's what I say. Some of this stuff, is very formula related and very, very straightforward to explain. And then some of it comes from practice and rehearsal, and you got to have there's got to be some level of skill. That's why there's usually a sculptor who's the expert master of everything. And then you could have carvers and workers that do different things, whether they just point, whether they do hands, whether they do hair. They're not an overall expert on something. And so, because sculptors require more training and more development, they tend to be available at a premium, where someone that has less training and less ability is not as valuable as an employee. They've still got value, but their value is different. So I'm to the point where we've cut everything up, pretty much up to where her hand's gonna be. This is her cuff on the sleeve. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start working on some of the basic rough out of her form, because her shape and everything, and as I go along, if I have a question, I'll look at these points that I marked here, that I marked there, and I'll just pull the calipers again from there. And I should be able to pull a caliper and go to that red dot on the plaster that I've already shot, swing it on the triangle, and then come over here, and wherever I'm coming from, it should go right to that red dot, okay? Because as long as I come from the same foundation points on the job and the model as I do on the model, I don't necessarily have to strike them in order to find them, because it should clip right in. Remember, we've been, when we get to the end, we just set it down and it just sets right in the red dot. And so checking it can be pretty fast. If you find it doesn't match, you figure out why. You're going to have discrepancies. You're going to have things that you've got to tweak and adjust. Right now, the visual noise with this right now is a lot, because for the most part, these points that we've shot are all low. They're the low spot, and we've left material around them, okay? We did that on purpose. We shot points high. For the most part, everything's on top of a drapery fold or what. There's a few that are on like where her actual thigh would be, as opposed to being on top of a fold that's near that. By putting them on the fold, it gives us a little bit of leeway if for some reason that's not in the right place. And it's, especially if it's supposed to be tall, like if we shot it too low, well, theoretically, if we've left material around it that's above it, that's supposed to be below it, you can shift that piece of drapery over, 1/8 of an inch and cover it. So hopefully you don't have to do that. You should do everything right, but it can happen. So what I'm going to work on now is putting these lines together, trying to make this start to flow and get rid of some of this bulk material because like from this point to this point, it's supposed to be concave, and right now it's really proud. It's proud by like an inch. And so that's really going to confound you as you look at it, and you've got to learn to be able to understand where you're going. And we'll start making her look more like her. And I've got to pull the trigger and start casting that plaster, and get everything set up. We'll probably try to do it when we've got a little bit of warm weather coming up, because we're getting into cooler weather, and you just have to, you know, plan accordingly. Plaster isn't bad to do when it's cold. I mean, I know if it's below freezing, it's not ideal. It's just cold wet work to do when it's not hot out. So but I'm going to keep working on this, and we'll show you what I can. We're getting into the different light portion of the year with the studio. With daylight savings times and that, it changes where the light is. It's in a lot earlier, and so you can see it totally blows up. You know, this is worse than me putting the light on, because I can turn the light on. I don't even know if it'll come on now because it's cold. It'll give it a minute. But the light won't even compare to what the sunlight does. It just wipes it out. So hang in there, and let's cut some stone. All right, I've done a little bit more with this, and I've decided that it's time to stand it up. So I'm gonna rearrange things and clean this all up. Part of standing up too is to have more room to cast, so I can have room inside, because my floor space is pretty limited. And this time of year, I don't really want to do it out in the weather if I don't have to. I can't trust the weather, so I'm gonna stand this up, and then that'll make doing all of her drapery and everything a lot easier. We've got a lot of reference points in here all around for whether it's feathers or drapery or anatomy or foundation points initiated for the point machine. We got a lot of progress done, and so I'm not gonna say this is the end of the swinging compasses, but this is pretty close to the end for the bulk of it. It's a trade-off. You know, we could swing compasses until this was completely pointed, like really go nuts and just point every inch or so. There's just not enough time on this project to do it. So I'm going to stand it up and start working it and start carving it. This is going to give me a lot better place to start carving it. You know, and this may, you'll see it when it's stood up, what it looks like. And this may still look like chaos to a lot of people. You got to understand that this is work, okay? This isn't this isn't some parlor trick, okay? This is about how much I have to do and how little I can get away with doing in order to get to that result. Normally, when I carve something like the size of the plaster, when I've got a 4-foot niche, I hadn't pointed a 4-foot niche in years, because you just carve it. You know, you have a full length, you know, the St. Francis with a dove, you just carve it. You just look at it and know where things go, because you've done lots and lots and lots of them, and you just cut it. And so when you start getting into life-size stuff, you know, I wanted to have an opportunity to show you how to point with compasses. And so, you know, the process is the same. You know, you swipe them 3 points and make them cross, make a match, and shoot a point, and that's it. And so I'll stand this up, and we'll start direct carving it. And there's probably going to be points that we either double check proof or maybe even shoot new, but I've got to balance this drapery that we've initiated with this extra 1 inch that we've added here in order to get this to tip right, because we've got drapery coming around her knee that's going to flow through here, and we've got to have all that come together. And if I tip one of these drapery lines here, if I tip it too much, it's going to end up not doing gravity. I want it to point right to the bottom where her feet are going to be, so it's really nice. And so we've got to work on that. So I'm going to stand it up, and I'll spend a mess of time cranking on these chains, and we'll through the magic of video, when y'all come back and see, when I come back and y'all see this, it'll be standing up. So, see you in a bit. When you put your chassis inside your plaster, because remember we've got a T across there, board running up the back, reinforcement across the top, and this is hydrocal, okay, but this allows us to handle this, and see she stands up on her own, okay? That's a really big deal. If you just cast this out of plaster and let it sit there, that whole bottom will blow off, and you won't be able to handle it. Now I'll get the hand truck, my little hand truck, to move her around so it's safe to move her. But you got to think ahead, because this outrigger, this is all 2x4, and that's all attached really well inside there. And you've got to, because I've got this boxed in, you've got to do it careful and really plan it so if you're going to handle it, because this is still heavy. Now this is weighs, I'd be curious to find out what the actual ratio or rate is as it cures and dries out, because it's been, I don't know, it's been months since we cast this. It's been quite a while, and so it'll lose a lot of weight as it dries because it retains water. That's the initial weight gain, and it'll go back to weighing a lot less. So we've also got our hook in here, which is an eye bolt that we can use to secure it when we put her up on the mezzanine after we're done. But this is a really big deal. Make sure to do it right and be careful, and then handle it carefully. You'll be really glad you did. All right, back to work. Okay, this is super dusty. Got to get everything cleaned up before I can handle the stone, or I'll just be wallowing in the dust. So I'm going to run 2 or 3 cans of water to the floor. We're getting near the end of the day. I may lift this and set it down on the bottom blocks, and then I'll quit, and I'll do more rigging tomorrow in the morning when I'm fresh, but I'll get all this preliminary work done, and this dust won't be the issue. This is one of the big benefits of having a player start the studio. lot softer to work on than concrete floor. Can give you a little margin of safety in case you drop something really heavy on your foot, lands on your foot. You might just squish it instead of cutting it off. Then you can water your dust into it. Some you water and it cools it down. So it's really surprising how much it cools it down. Yeah, 2 or 3 buckets of water. Get your watering can and use it. This one's a little small. I had a bigger one. I gave it to Andy when I left Barry. And it's probably still at Gary's. And it just makes a really nice floor. And the red clay down here, boy, makes a great floor. So we'll let that settle in, and that'll trap a lot of dust, keeps a lot of your danger down. And so while I'm wrestling these belts, I don't have quite as much of a problem. It'll be dry into the center. It'll be damp under the center, but dry into the center. So there'll be a little bit of dust, but it shouldn't be too bad. And we'll have to block this on the corners like we did before, so we can cross around, just stand it right up. And it's really surprising when you look at this stone, how much of this stone is going to be gone, because we're going to cut all of this off, almost a quarter of it. Not quite a quarter, but a big portion of it. Probably almost a fifth of this stone is going to be cut right away. And we'll put her together and get everything right, and then we'll develop this arm. We'll figure out where it's going to be and where it's not going to be, and we'll stay high, and I'll probably drill a series of holes from each side. We'll go through in the bottom, a couple places, we'll go all the way through and penetrate it, and we'll probably penetrate it up here so we can tie it really secure to the crane, and then we can finish drilling it off and splitting it off while it's standing up instead of laying it down again, because it's just a lot of work to lay it down. And if we can put enough good tension on it, we should put some blocks in so nothing chips. It shouldn't be too dangerous to cut it off there, but we'll cut off over in here. I don't know just where her wings will end, we'll find out, and we'll have this whole big corner going. Plus we're pushing back stone here, and we're taking stone away on the back. We're gonna lose a lot of weight on this stone. Cool deal. Okay. If I was smart, I would have diagrammed all my belts and which one went where when I was handling rigging it before, so I could remember. All I remember is basically there's a lot of pulling to twist a lot of belts to make it fit and make it work. I don't know if I said it on these videos before. I've said it a lot, just in general, but at some point, you got to quit combing your hair, because it's not going to look any better. It's as good as it's ever going to look. And it's the same thing with doing the stone, okay? We're at the end, basically. There'll be a little more swinging compasses, but we're basically at the end of doing the compasses, okay? And I'm not going to take the camera and pan over everything and get perfect lighting and have the do cool music that people do, or the slow motion stuff, and that's not reality. This is reality, okay? We're swung compasses to get this done, what we need to do. We've got a bunch of landmarks, so we got this figure located pretty well on the stone. And like I said, normally you just look at it and cut it, and you just blow right through it. And that's the nice thing about doing the icons and some of the drapery that sort of stand out, because in this genre things go in certain places, and you just learn by repetition, because you do them over and over again, you learn where they go. So I think I'm at that point, and so I just got to move on. And it'll be like that with any of this. At some point you got to quit carving it, and that's one reason that I really, really, really like and really advocate doing a clay model. And then if it's in the budget, whatever, if it works, casting it. Because when you cast that clay into plaster, it completely transforms how you perceive and comprehend those shapes in 3 dimensions, and how they relate to each other, what looks right, what looks, like on the plaster, I decided that this point, this breast, her breast point over here that I shot looked like it was a little bit low. Now she's not supposed to be, this curvy bikini model, but that looked a little low, and so I built it up a little bit with some clay because I thought it needed it. And that amounts to maybe it's probably going to be about an inch on the stone. Now if I don't like it, I can cut it off. It's easy to cut it off later, really hard to put it back. And we've got to figure where her head and everything and all that works. So I've been coordinating, working on the clay, so I can make sure that it meets well with the plaster, so that everything fits to where it's supposed to be. But at some point, you just have to say, that's as good as I can do it, and I got to move on. Maybe she looks good, maybe she doesn't. Okay? Maybe this is going to look good, maybe it won't. Whatever it looks like, it'll be what I did, and I'll own it because it's my job. And I've watched masters, men that I consider to be masters that are far better than me, and this was during my apprenticeship and after my apprenticeship, do really phenomenal work. I've also seen them do work that could have been more phenomenal, okay? And they were really good. And so that means to me that I'm just as fallible as they are, okay? I don't want to have an arm that's 3 inches longer than it's supposed to be. I don't want to have a great big melon head or a little tiny head. I don't want to have it look like she's got bones that are made out of rubber. All of those things happen. And they happen to keep us humble. And this is why when when I would say to Giuliano or to Gary or to whoever, you're a master sculptor, and they'd be like, you need to shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. The stone is the master. The stone will teach. The stone will make sure that I do what I do, and it will tell the truth. And that's what's gonna happen with this. I'm not gonna go, we'll stand this up and she'll make sense. I gotta figure out where the belts go and which belt, and pull on these chains for too long. This is when it's really nice to have a button and go and it just picks it up and moves it. I don't have that. I've got these chains and I think they work well for me. But this is you have to be able to make the decision to cut that stone and move forward. There's no going back. And at some point you just have to say, yep, that's as good as I can get it, and you quit and you move on. So we're gonna start rigging this. I'm not gonna get into a big description. I probably will write down which belts go where this time, just because. We'll see where we come back, if this is all set up again or not. I'm gonna get to work, make this happen. This fire hose is awesome, okay? I had two of them, I don't know what I got right off. This wider fire hose, you can split it like this, then you can put it on your endless belts to protect them from being cut up on the corners. We mount this down here, these will get destroyed, and the belts will be perfect. And watch your surplus places. Check with your local fire department, because this stuff expires after it's been used so many times. They have to trade it out. And I'm not going to say you can get it for free, but if you ask them real nice, you might. And every once in a while you'll find a surplus place that's selling it. We went and got this geared trolley. There just happened to be a surplus place down in that same direction. We drove about 40 minutes and got, I don't know, they had all you wanted for free. They got 15 or 20 hoses. Gave some other ones to some Monument people I work with that were really happy. I got 2 or 3 more for me. We both got lifetime supplies of it. It's great stuff. And it's what you, then you can use it for your softs, for your pads, so the stone sets on them. Just keep it clean, and it's awesome stuff. Now as I'm letting this down, turn this off so you can hear. I've got blocks inboard on each corner, so I can go across in the middle and underneath like I had it rigged before. You got to be really careful right down here on the floor. I'm going to rake this again and pat it under this back edge. I'll probably put a board down and put pads on top of it, because as we rotate it, if that pivots on that edge, put a lot of stress on that edge, and that's not ideal. So we want to be really careful. That's why I try to turn them in the air if I can when they're this big, because this is just a lot of weight. And if you have any little stones here on the ground, they can cause pressure points, and they just pop that back edge, and then our joint's going to be buttered up. Because behind her, over to about right here, this is all probably important real estate. We're going to keep that. We can't have any damage on that edge. So we got to be really careful. But now it's a bunch of crawling around and getting everything rigged up. If you start buying hoists, chain falls to do this work, this is my personal opinion, okay? There's some hoists that are very robust and they're very, they tend to be more expensive. CM hoist, a Yale hoist, I think my 10-ton is a Yale. Well, it's a CM. It's a Cyclone, and this is the other orange one is a CM. It's a low headroom trolley. They're more expensive because the gear reduction and all the stuff inside them works better. They sound different. They pull smoother. They're not as herky-jerky when you're pulling on them, especially when there's a load on them. I bought this Harrington 5-ton hoist. Old stuff is, some of it's made in the USA, some of it's made in Japan. I think the Harrington's made in Japan. It's a 5-ton, and it feels like a little toy compared to my 3-ton CM. The CM's a lot nicer hoist. So you don't usually know this, and if you go and buy like the Chinese ones, Jet, especially the newer stuff and that, it's probably going to be cheap. And like I said, we talked about this earlier, stuff that's engineered, usually for sale in the U.S., a lot of because of the liability issues, they'll be engineered like this 3-ton gantry crane that I've got is an American-made, I forget the brand, but it's my understanding that they're tested to 125% of their rated capacity. That means if it's 3 tons, it's been tested to 25% beyond that, 3 tons. And so, a quarter of 3 is 30 is 7.5, and so it's been tested to almost 1,000 pounds over, and they usually have a failure factor of 2. Okay. So that means that theoretically this 3-ton crane wouldn't just collapse until I put 6 tons on it. And this is what I understand from talking to engineers, okay? This isn't gospel. If you buy the Chinese stuff that weighs half as much, it's half as thick, it's half as robust, and it says 3 tons, that's probably the maximum rating it's going to handle. It'll go 3 tons, and when you put 32 or 3,500 pounds on it, it's going to start to fail and could be catastrophic. And I assume that's how some of these lighter hoists are made as well, is that they're designed for a certain amount of weight, and they may be designed to where that's a failure rating, a lot closer to a failure rating than the ones that are more robust like the American ones, because the snatch block, pulley block on the 3-ton is as big, if not bigger, than the one on this 5-ton Harrington. And so, do a little bit of research and spend the money. If you're going to buy crane stuff, buy good stuff. This 5-ton was cheap, and I bought it because I needed it on the fly, and I'm not real thrilled with it. So, but for right now, I don't usually do work this size. I like my 10 ton and I like my 3 ton, but this 5 ton helps out. So, back to pulling on the chains. Spread out. Pulling on chains gets old. Tools do this. Yeah, it's gonna be something else. Yeah, that's gonna work great. Let's see. Here's our sweet spot for our hose, for all our carving. The suction is great. Right between my 2 booms, I can use either one. Now, this one's better to use because my airflow is like this, but you can also put a couple of pieces of pipe on this to go over and down and get it right where we want it to be, and then we can have different ends because we'll have to have some way down low, and this obviously won't work here. So this will work just fine. You come over here, drop it down, and we'll be perfect. So this is how you set your studio up really matters, because you got to be able to get your equipment in place and get what you want. We got to make sure that this is level. We're going to have to spend some time playing with this to get it so that it's really plumb and square and everything is just right, and we'll be golden. So I did want to say, when you, where are they? When you cut your pad, like I was cutting these off, okay, these don't cut easy. These are really tough, and if you're not careful, you'll take off a finger practically cutting them. So use a good knife, use a straight edge, make sure to keep your fingers out of the way. I haven't found that it's real productive even with like trauma shears. It's hard. You can do it with tin snips and they'll cut. But the way every time I cut them, and I split them like I showed you, where I cut it up the edge to slip it around the belt, so I can slip it across the belt. You know, obviously if you've got slings with eyes on each end, just feed it through. That's how when you order like a 50-ton crane to install a stone, and it's going to be rough edges and you got to handle it, tell them to bring sleeves, because if you don't, if they nick a belt, they charge you for a belt and you have to buy it, and it can really make a dent in your budget. So because they'll charge you a full tilt retail on them, and you know that's a drag, man. Instead of cutting them on the edge, they'll stay on your belt a little bit better if you cut them down the center. And I keep thinking I'm going to cut them like that, and then I forget. So whatever. You know, eventually I'll get there, but anyways, so stone's all ready to be rigged into place, and we'll be able to set up and start carving an angel. So my name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculptor Studio, working on a great big life-size angel. Thanks for coming in.